My name is Marika Sardar, and I'm a curator at the Aga Khan Museum. As we get ready to celebrate Canada Day, I, as a newcomer, was wondering how to mark this day in terms of art, so I turned to my colleagues for some advice. They assured me that one of the defining characteristics of Canada as a nation was a desire for conversation and debate. And for sure, right now, there are plenty of issues swirling around in North America, so that I had plenty of options to choose from. But one issue I've been watching with interest as an art historian is the conversation we're having about large-scale public sculpture and what to do with these kinds of things when they represent controversial figures, and whether the removal of these types of sculpture from the public sphere can be characterized as a rewriting of history. Coming from the US, I've been living in Canada for about a year now. The debate has centered on the founding fathers who owned slaves, as well as the leaders of the American Civil War who fought on the side of the Confederacy and in support of slavery. In Canada, the debate seems to focus on those with a history of a terrible treatment of the Indigenous people, figures such as Jack Dayton and, more insidiously, John Macdonald. On both sides of the border, those arguing for the removal of these kind of statues point not just to the problem of glorifying figures with, shall we say, problematic views on race, but it's also the effect that these figures have when they are in our public landscapes, even if they are just stone and bronze rather than flesh. We've learned that these aren't merely portraits anymore, but painful and constant reminder to the people against whom these men's violence was directed, reminders of centuries of mistreatment, and at the same time, the indifference today of most people to that history of mistreatment, people who can walk by these statues without a second thought. So how does this relate to the Aga Khan Museum's collection? Well, it certainly makes me ambivalent about works of art such as this, and it's got me to thinking about whether we should be presenting him in the galleries, and if so, how we do this. This is the portrait of a British man made in India in the mid-19th century. He is Sir Henry Fane, who served as Commander-in-Chief of the British Indian Army between 1835 and 1840. He was stationed in the Punjab, an area that today spans parts of northwestern India and northeastern Pakistan. We could start by looking at this painting in terms of style, and we can see that it falls in line directly in the traditions of painting where Fane was resident in the Punjab. We recognize across all of these images a certain approach to modeling the body, a preference for a certain kind of color palette, as well as the use of a distinctive oval border along with spiraling vegetal motifs to frame the imagery. The paintings shown here are religious in nature, but Fane's portrait can also be seen to fall in line with portraits of other public figures from the region, including Maharaja Karak Singh, who came to power in September 1839, just before Fane's departure. And he is also shown on a terrace with a pierced stone balustrade. He's seated, he's got a sword, and the image is bounded by an oval-shaped frame. This portrait of Raja Hira Singh, who became the top minister in the Punjab in 1843, is similarly composed with terrace, sword, and frame, but in addition, he, like Fane, is seated on a chair, the depiction on chair versus bolster on the floor, carrying various political meanings. We can also do things like more precisely date the portrait by the medal attached to Fane's chest. It's the medal of the Order of the Auspicious Star of the Punjab, created by Maharaja Ranjit Singh, Karak Singh's father and ruler of the Punjab between 1801 and 1839. It was awarded to Fane around April 1837 when he was attending the wedding of Ranjit Singh's grandson in Lahore. We might imagine, therefore, that the portrait was made at this time and was created by a court artist. But if we simply talked about style and dating in a label in the galleries, we would be avoiding dealing with the forces that caused this image to come into being in the first place. The fact is that at the time this painting was made, the British Army was attempting to expand its territories out from Bengal and Awadh and into the Punjab, where Fane was situated. The aforementioned Ranjit Singh was therefore of major interest to the British as a powerful monarch who had his own plans for consolidating power in the Punjab. For his part, while touring his jurisdiction and attending weddings, Fane was sending secret dispatches back to the Lieutenant General in Agra, clinically assessing the military capabilities of the different groups vying for power in the Punjab, identifying the best places for attack, or making suggestions, for instance, for certain fortresses whose were useful for the British defense, but whose repairs would be paid by the Indians in the form of taxes. These papers survive, written and signed, in Fane's own hand, in the British Library, records that lay bare how the British planned to take over the Indian subcontinent and that would lead to the Anglo-Sikh Wars of 1845 to 1849. So by showing this painting, we would be dealing with this aspect of history that took place, there's no denying that, and it can't and it shouldn't be erased. The dangers of rewriting history are evident in many parts of the world, not least of which India at the moment. But what the recent round of protests around the statues is trying to move the needle of public consciousness on is making us aware that in displaying such work, we are taking the space from other figures who could be displayed and discussed, and we are potentially causing pain to visitors for whom such an image brings up traumatic pasts. Today, we're thinking more about the cumulative effect of being confronted like images like this, especially when accompanied by benignly written labels. And I write this myself as someone who has mixed Indian and English heritage, who is still trying to come to grips with an appropriate response. Just something to chew on as we fire up the Canada Day barbecue and come together as community for the first time in months.